Hello. I want to say a few words about this COVID roadmap that the Prime Minister has announced yesterday. I didn't see the news directly, I was busy and I was very tired, but I got the Times today. This is the cover. And yesterday's papers had anticipated this speech, so they also covered it a bit. But this is the outline, so if you missed that, pay attention because this is important. So, March the 8th, back to school. Two people from different households can meet outside for a coffee. So, presumably, with that, coffee shops will reopen. Um, I would assume. Care home residents can have one nominated visitor. March the 29th, the rule of six returns, with people from up to six households allowed to meet outside. Stay-at-home rule will end. Outdoor sports facilities will reopen. April the 12th, all shops, including hairdressers, allowed to reopen and pubs allowed to serve alcohol outdoors. So does that mean they're prohibited from indoors? Uh, Staycations permitted for one household. I'm not quite sure what that means. If yeah, May the 17th, groups of up to 30 can meet outdoors and two households indoors. Theatres and other venues can reopen. Foreign travel may resume. June the 21st, all legal limits on social contact removed, with no limits on numbers at funerals and weddings. Now, Boris Johnson's facing pressure from both sides. Facing pressure from backbenchers who say this is too slow, and with the number of vaccines that have already been rolled out for the most vulnerable, the pace should be faster. And then on the other hand, there is the medical profession who are raising concerns about some of this as well. Keir Starmer has cautiously welcomed these proposals. One thing I give Starmer credit for is he's not partisan for the sake of it. Um, he will support the Prime Minister when he thinks the Prime Minister's getting it right. Um, so, for me personally, I'm going to disclose something here, which is quite a personal thing, and I don't want to talk too much about it. But my father recently had a heart attack, and he's 64. His health is not great. He's overweight, and he's due an operation on March the 3rd in Glasgow, Clydebank to be precise. That's very much on my mind. And I'm just going to say this: if it's a worst case scenario, um, in Scotland, there's currently a limit of 20 people at funerals. Um, so I'm seriously considering the possibility that I will have to get a ticket up there, a train ticket. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have to look into this to see if I could travel as an individual in Scotland and England. The SNP has very rigid rules at the moment. Some have praised that. I would have thought this would be an exceptional circumstance going to that sort of situation. Obviously, I hope that isn't the outcome, but it's something that is on my mind. Um, but that's the sort of sacrifice that we've had in this pandemic. A lot of people have lost loved ones and not been able to be with them. My mum can't even visit my dad in hospital. So we should never ever take for granted sacrifices that this, let's say, COVID generation have made. Um, I would argue they are just as bad as wartime sacrifices. Um, and that's not a flippant statement because World War II veterans have themselves said that. So it's not just like because I'm a millennial, that's my perspective. Older people have said the same thing. The sacrifices of this are real. Um, Now, on a more light-hearted note, April the 12th for hairdressers. I don't have, some people have their own, like uh, what would you call it, razor. Even if I did, I wouldn't really know what I'm doing. Um, my hair is relatively big right now. But it's only February the 23rd, so that's like a month and a half away. think I'm going to have a bit of big hair by April the 12th. I think hairdressers will do very good business around them, but we may have a situation where there's a queue, like you'll need to book in advance or something like that. In Sunderland, there's a business called SB Academy. They're great. They basically offer haircuts for just £1 for men. They're student hairdressers, but they're very professionally trained, and they do a great job. So I imagine they're going to do very well. I have a friend who cut my hair the last time. He has one of those razor things, and he done a very good job. I joked that I would give him a tip or something for it. Um, so I think there's going to be a lot of people with big hair around April the 12th. Other things that I'm interested in, let's see, May the 17th, groups of up to 30 can meet outside, outdoors, and two households indoors. Theatres and other venues can reopen. I assume that includes cinema. I've been very vocal about my concerns about cinema. Well, that's still 3 months away. So, somewhere like Sunderland, which only has one cinema, I am concerned about what sort of permanent damage that could cause. So I really, really hope that when it does reopen, they get a big footfall of customers. I'll certainly be going. I'm even going to go to see a film that I may not be that interested in, just to boost the business, because I feel so strongly about the big screen. Um, my sister-in-law recently introduced me to Netflix, and there's a great selection there. But no, I don't think you could beat the big screen. So that's definitely something I really hope will survive this, and it's a question mark. Now, about travel, I kind of take the view that in this pandemic, non-necessary travel is madness. Unless you're visiting a dying relative or it's absolutely essential work, I really don't know why people would put themselves through the stress and the anxiety of travel at this time. I'm sort of taking the logic that's just out of the question until at least the middle of this year. Um, I've heard people say, well, we'll travel, we'll risk the quarantine, but Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, announced controversial plans for possibly 10 years imprisonment, which were very controversial. That's a harsher sentence than what rapists and even some murderers get. So, it's definitely controversial. And I do think that needs to be scrutinized. That is people not declaring that they've traveled through red zone countries. I mean, that is draconian, no question about it. And it definitely needs scrutinized. But to me, unless you're visiting a dying relative, I think that travel is just madness at the moment. I certainly wouldn't do it. I have enormous sympathy for people who are in this limbo, but I also think it's very foolish to travel at this time. Honestly, I would say to anyone, just my opinion, if you've got travel plans, I would scrap them. I really would, because you're going to end up in a situation where you'll either get fined or you'll have to quarantine. People have been complaining about the hotel quarantines. I have sympathy with them to some extent from a human perspective, but at the same time, I'm thinking, why did you book a holiday during a pandemic? It seems a bit foolish, unless they had to do it, for the aforementioned reasons. I've noticed, like on YouTube, the BBC report, a lot of people were treating this with skepticism. They said, "Oh well, the lockdown will come in just afterwards." I'm a little bit more optimistic. I think this time it might actually be the final road. It's worth remembering the Spanish influenza lasted about 3 years, from early 1918 to late 1920. However, the real bulk, the peak of that was late 1918, and that was 100 years ago. So I do think that we can be proud of the amount of vaccines that have been rolled out in this country. We are leading the way. That's something we can be proud of as a nation. I also think Labour is onto something when they're saying that this could be a 1945 moment, for example, in social care. The effect that on care homes in this has been profound. So I do think this could be a pivotal moment in our history. A while back it was all about Brexit. Brexit really has been sidelined by this. This is something that has changed the world, and no event in my lifetime has impacted the world to the same extent. None. So if everything goes back to normal, that would be ridiculous. Not just in terms of domestic issues, for example, social care and perhaps community spirit. There's a lot of areas that we need to look at. Ecology. This pandemic has affected ecological issues in a profound way. We saw the impact of less human activity, so that's something that's going to be looked at. Um, Conservation efforts, also geopolitics. I really think that this needs to be a wake-up call in our relation to China. And I know I might sound like a broken record with this, but we cannot have business as normal with that regime. We just can't. Dominic Raab's taken a tough line. Apparently, we're going to be on the human rights rotational body. Raab's going to use that as an opportunity to lambast China and Russia. Good. I do think we need tough leadership. They won't like it. They'll complain. They'll accuse the West of interfering. All the usual stuff. They'll come out with the usual lies. Um, the Chinese Communist Party get the gold medal when it comes to lies. Um, I have to say, I quite like Dominic Raab. I think he's quite a strong foreign secretary. Um, he's being assertive, he's taking a tough line on this, and that's not just tough for the sake of looking tough. I think it's justified. Um, so I also like the fact that this is kind of perhaps diverging from the point of this video. He's not woke. Rab has taken ire from feminists. He's taken ire from the woke brigade for his whole knee thing. But anyway, that's another issue. Um, I'm not saying I agree with everything. I think he probably handled the case of Harry Dunn that possibly could have been handled better. The young guy in Norfolk who was knocked down by the American diplomat's wife. But this roadmap that Boris Johnson has come out with, it might be. I wonder, does he see it as his Churchill moment? Boris Johnson is very much of the school of thought of the great men of history defining history. Um, No, I think it's too early to really judge Johnson's premiership. He's been in office for a year and a half. No prime minister's had to deal with anything like this. Nothing even comes close domestically to a pandemic on this scale. I suppose David Lloyd George during the 1918 pandemic. Um, and of course, Lloyd George had the weight of World War One as well. Um, but definitely, this will be a major, major focus of Johnson's legacy when he eventually leaves office. Um, but will also be, I think, a factor in Starmer's legacy, how he treated this as an opposition leader. Um, but time will tell. I think that I do think this is the beginning of the end now. I'm quite optimistic because of the number of vaccines that have been rolled out. My mum, who is 67, she's got her vaccine. My dad hasn't got his yet, and I'm not sure what the hospital's going to do if they would do that before an operation or what. He's very much on my mind. But anyway, the only reason I don't want to go into more details with that is because it is very personal, and yeah, that's it. But let me know your thoughts. What thing do you most miss? For me, it's certainly my family. Although I talk to my mum most days on FaceTime. Um, Coffee shops, cinema. I miss the cinema a lot. Um, and my friends, we would socialize a lot, watch films. I miss that. But I know that's coming back in, by the looks of it, March the 29th. Businesses I've huge sympathy for, especially small businesses. I try to, if I've got spare change or something, I'll let them keep the change just as a small gesture of, you know, it's a reflection of hard times. But let's just hope this is successful. And I know people are frustrated, but I would suggest optimism because the dynamic is different this time. With the previous two lockdowns, the vaccines weren't being rolled out, so I'm quite optimistic. but we'll see what happens.